Hey, what's up guys, and welcome back to the channel. I'm here to do my reaction of Season 1 of Ahsoka Episode 6, titled Far, Far Away. Obviously, there are going to be big spoilers in this video as we talk about the big reaction points, and it's not so much a breakdown, but rather my overall thoughts on the episode and big pieces of lore that I think are going to be explored later and expounded upon. So let's go ahead and break it down. Now, obviously, this is the episode where we finally get to see Grand Admiral Thrawn, played by Lars Mikkelsen, who of course voiced Admiral Thrawn in the Rebels series. Although we only get a few short scenes of Grand Admiral Thrawn, I think his development so far is exceptionally interesting. This version that we're getting in Ahsoka is far more developed than he was in Rebels, with many fans having the critique that Admiral Thrawn comes off far more evil than he does a lawful neutral like he does in Legends and many of the canon novels. However, with that said, this takes place roughly 10 years after the events of Rebels, and I feel the progression of Admiral Thrawn is appropriate here. Admiral Thrawn has been backed into far many corners that now he's pushed to compromise the morals that he once held strong. But what's even more important than that is this Thrawn, although he's extremely powerful, he's also injured. But why that's important is that an injured animal is also an extremely dangerous one. Thrawn has been pushed to his last leg, and this is his chance to get back to the known galaxy. Many of Thrawn's greatest resources do not lie in Peridea as we see. Thrawn has found great enlightenment while here, but the grand resources that still remain in the Empire and Imperial loyalists lie within the galaxy that Thrawn departed, and he is desperate to get back to it. But along with this, Thrawn's motives and how he goes about it is also exceptionally interesting. It's clear now that Thrawn has embraced an aspect of the galaxy that he had not yet taken into account, that being the Force itself. In Star Wars Rebels, Thrawn was only bested 2 times. Once was by the Bendu, which he could not account for, and the other was by the Purrgil via Ezra Bridger, his 2 major defeats coming at the hands of Force sensitives, with the Force sensitives using aspects that Thrawn did not fully understand. But this is why this depiction of Grand Admiral Thrawn appears to be much more dangerous. Unlike before, he's embraced the aspects of the Force that he did not fully comprehend earlier in his life, and now he's using them to his advantage. He's embraced the Dathomiri that lie in Peridea, and it's clear that they too have alternative goals, looking to Thrawn as almost a savior. Moving on, I think the world of Peridea and what it represents to our different characters is also exceptionally interesting. It's the place where the Purrgil goes to die, but it's also the birthplace of the Dathomiri and what could potentially be the beginnings of the Jedi Order. To Baylan, Peridea represents life. To Ahsoka, it likely represents a brighter future that she is willing to accept because she is able to make peace with her past in the previous episode. But to individuals like Thrawn and Ezra, and even the Dathomiri Night Sisters, Peridea represents death, the literal place where the Purrgil have gone to die, and Thrawn knows that if he remains there too long, he too will ultimately die there. The world itself strikes home the main story of Ahsoka so far, that being the balance, the idea that to some, Peridea represents a salvation and a new beginning, while to others it represents a wasteland of the Force, a wasteland for one's very soul that they are desperate to cling to any chance of leaving it, and to do so, Thrawn, understanding that he now does not understand the Force, but now shares a strong connection to it with his allies, meaning one of the greatest parts of Grand Admiral Thrawn as a villain from Legends and previous canon such as Rebels is that he learns from his mistakes, meaning that the Thrawn that we encounter right now is the most dangerous version of him, even with his lack of resources. He's embraced the dark magic of the Dathomiri to apparently reconstruct his army, to allow them to look through the threads of time so that he can gain an advantage. What used to be Thrawn's greatest weakness is now proving to be one of the greatest strong points in his brand new army, the Dathomiri and the Force, a resource that he did not account for before, but now one that he's attempting to learn and understand. At the end of the episode, he even chastises Morgan, showing this growth, showing that the Dathomiri as well as the Jedi have been known to use tricks of resurrection. Thrawn has learned not to underestimate Force wielders and the Jedi, but now to embrace it. Moving on to something beyond the story though, I really think that this version of Star Wars that Dave Filoni is showing us truly excels as the combination between practical sets mixed with some CGI backgrounds. I love how you can tell at one point that the props are completely real, but a lot of the backgrounds are superimposed in. And I feel like this mixture is really where Star Wars excels, and although this episode of Ahsoka doesn't quite reach the visual heights of Andor, I feel as if we're finding that perfect middle ground between the two. Now, of course, I'd like to talk about performances. The two performances that really stand out here are, of course, Ray Stevenson as Baylan, and no surprise at all, Lars Mikkelsen as Thrawn. Lars Mikkelsen stated before that Thrawn in live action would have a different tone and a cadence than the one that he has in Rebels. And I feel like that this 10 years has really gone a long way to illustrate that. Again, this Thrawn to me seems exceptionally dangerous and vulnerable. And I feel like this comes across in the performance by Lars Mikkelsen. But make no mistake, he is clearly the greatest threat that the galaxy has right now, and he still effortlessly commands every single room just as he did in Legends. Talking more about the story, I sort of got the feeling of the early seasons of Game of Thrones, and the plotting behind the scenes, especially between Baylan and Thrawn. It's obviously clear that the two goals do not align with one another, and while Thrawn seeks to betray Baylan and potentially leave him in Peridea, I also am under the impression that Baylan expects this, and that he too is plotting and ready to overthrow Thrawn, that both of them have things up their sleeve that the other does not expect, and that in the end, the battle between Baylan and Thrawn that is forming will be a battle of wits and who holds more information. Right now, it's clear that Thrawn holds most of the keys, but if Baylan can find and speak with Ezra, and perhaps learn more about Peridea and the secrets of the world and how the Force itself operates here, the tables may be balanced. There is now a shroud of gray introduced to the Star Wars lore, that perhaps the ideas of both villains do not align perfectly, and that the greatest threats are the ones that are at peace right now. Thrawn has learned not to underestimate the Jedi before, and I bet that Baylan is expecting this. In terms of the overarching series, this very much feels like the beginning of a greater story, and it feels like a brilliant companion piece to the previous episode, a look and journey through the past, a journey for ourselves to encounter Anakin Skywalker and the Clone Wars again, but now an opportunity to look to the future. The previous episode was about reconciling with one's past and accepting the light and the dark within everybody, but the decision to ultimately embrace the light. Now though, we move to the future. What does the future hold? And what does the balance of the very galaxy mean? This is a story that I have a feeling that will be very overarchingly important for Star Wars for many years to come. With the Origins of the Jedi film that is in development, I would not be shocked at all if Peridea and this brand new galaxy is highly intrinsic in that story. Star Wars' interconnectivity is going to be more important than ever now, and Peridea and its relationship to both the past and the future of Star Wars lore is exceptionally important. And I feel like we're just beginning to grasp how important Peridea in this new galaxy really is, as well as most importantly, how it connects to the galaxy that we know. One of the major themes in this Ahsoka series has always been balance. What that means, finding balance in oneself and finding balance in one's emotions and how much they care for one another. I highly appreciated that this was hit home in the beginning of the episode, when Hu Yang does actually take the side of Sabine Wren, and explains that perhaps she chose to embrace Baylan and Shin with the opportunity that she could find her family in Ezra. With Ahsoka now not learning to specifically see in terms of light and dark, good and bad, right and wrong, but rather from the viewpoint of Sabine. That Sabine could betray Ahsoka, but in the end that she didn't do so for terrible reasons. A lesson that I believe that Anakin Skywalker tried to impart upon her, but more so, the lesson of forgiveness. Ahsoka will have to forgive Sabine Wren, and at that point, I believe she will fully become Ahsoka the White, and achieve a brand new understanding of the Force itself. Now moving on to the final topic I'd like to discuss is of course Ezra Bridger. Unfortunately, I don't have a ton to say about Ezra in terms of how he's been portrayed. Essentially, we know next to nothing about him, and I think it will take an episode or two to really get into the character and see the growth from Rebels to now. While I love the development that they've shown to us with Grand Admiral Thrawn and this brand new threat, I need a little bit more time with Ezra to really comprehend if I like this depiction or not. But anyway, my friends, that's just my initial reaction on the episode. I would love to hear your thoughts. What are your thoughts on this brand new era for Star Wars and a brand new beginning with Ahsoka, Episode 6, Far, Far Away? Do you believe that this is culminating into the future of Star Wars as we know it? And what was your favorite and least favorite part of the episode? As always, my friends, may the Force be with you, and thank you for supporting our archives.